Be me, I guess. This whole thing happened over the last couple of months. My friend Anna kept telling me I needed to get out more. She said I was spending way too much time at home, just working and coming back to my apartment. She wasn't wrong. My social life was basically non-existent. So she invites me out with her main group of friends. She'd been part of this group for years and always talked about how cool they were. A good mix of guys and girls, no drama, just chill people. I was nervous, but agreed to go. We were meeting up at some bar downtown on a Friday night. I remember spending way too long trying to figure out what to wear. Wanted to look good, but not like I was trying too hard. The classic dilemma. I finally get there, and the place is loud, but has a nice vibe. Anna waves me over to a big booth in the back. There were maybe 6 or 7 other people there. Anna does the introductions. There was her, another girl I didn't catch the name of, and 4 guys. She introduces them as Eric, Stephen, Dan, and some other guy. Dan was the loud one, telling some crazy story and making everyone laugh. Stephen was quieter, seemed more observant, just listening to everyone with a small smile. And then there was Eric. He was sitting at the end of the booth, kind of nursing his drink and scrolling on his phone when I walked up. He looked up when Anna said my name, and he had a really nice smile. He wasn't like a supermodel or anything, just a normal, handsome guy. Clean cut, nice shirt, seemed put together. I slide into the booth next to Anna, and I'm trying to just follow the conversation. Dan is still going on, and I'm laughing along, but I can feel Eric looking over every now and then. After a few minutes, he puts his phone away and leans forward a bit. He asks me how I know Anna. Just a simple, normal question. We started talking, and it was so easy. It wasn't like one of those awkward first conversations where you're just firing off questions like a job interview. We talked about a new movie that just came out, some shows we were both watching. He was an engineer, told me a little about his work, but didn't bore me with technical details. I told him about my job as a barista, and he actually seemed interested, asking about the weirdest drink orders I've ever gotten. He was a great listener. He'd let me finish a thought without interrupting. It felt like the rest of the noisy bar just faded away. At one point, I noticed Stephen watching us from across the table. He wasn't staring in a creepy way, just kind of observing. When he caught my eye, he just gave a little nod and went back to his conversation with Dan. It felt like he was sizing me up for his friend. The night went on, and Eric and I were pretty much locked into our own little world. He bought me my next drink without me even asking. He just went to the bar and came back with another one for me. It was a small gesture, but it felt really thoughtful. I was genuinely having a good time, better than I'd had in a long time. I felt like I fit in with the group. Everyone was friendly, nobody was weird or standoffish. Towards the end of the night, as people were starting to talk about leaving, Eric pulled out his phone. He was really casual about it. He said he had a great time talking to me and that he'd like to do it again. Asked if he could get my number. My stomach did a little flip. Of course, I said yes. I gave him my number, and he sent me a text right away so I would have his. It just said Eric. We all said our goodbyes, and I shared a ride home with Anna. She was practically buzzing. She kept saying how she knew Eric would like me. She told me he was a really good guy, smart, stable, and had been single for a while. Apparently, he was pretty picky and didn't just date anyone. That made me feel even better. I went to bed that night feeling really optimistic. The next morning, I woke up to a text from him. Hope you got home safe. Had a really great time meeting you last night. We started texting back and forth all day. It was just light, fun stuff. Sending each other funny pictures, talking about our plans for the weekend. The conversation never felt forced. There weren't any of those awkward pauses where you don't know what to say next. This went on for the next few days. It became a routine. A good morning text from him. Little check-ins throughout the day. It was nice. It felt like someone was actually thinking about me. We made plans to go see that movie we had talked about at the bar. He was going to pick me up the following Friday. I was so excited. I told Anna all about it. She was thrilled, saying everything was going perfectly. I really thought it was. Eric seemed different from the other guys I had dated or talked to recently. He was confident, but not arrogant. He was interested in my thoughts, not just hearing himself talk. He didn't make any weird comments or try to push things too fast. It felt healthy. The week leading up to our date was great. The texting continued, and we even had a phone call one night that lasted for almost 2 hours. We just talked about everything and nothing. Family, goals, dumb childhood stories. I remember thinking to myself that this could actually be the start of something real. The weekend before our date, Stephen was having a small get-together at his place, just the main group, for a game night or something. Anna invited me, and she said Eric was hoping I would come. So, of course, I went. This was my second time hanging out with the whole group. It was a lot more relaxed than the bar. We were just chilling in Stephen's living room. Some people were playing a board game, others were just talking. Eric's face lit up when I walked in. He immediately came over, gave me a light hug, and got me a drink. He stayed by my side for most of the beginning of the night. We weren't playing the game, just sitting on the couch talking. It was comfortable. I felt totally at ease with him and with his friends. Dan was telling another one of his wild stories, this time about his job. He was complaining about his new manager. He said something about how she was making all these new rules that made no sense. He said, "And then she told me my project proposal was aggressively masculine. What does that even mean? I was just trying to be direct and efficient." A couple of people chuckled, and that's when it happened. Without even really thinking about it, I jumped into the conversation. I saw it as a teachable moment. I felt it was important to offer a different perspective. I said something like, "Well, you have to consider the environment women are forced to navigate in the corporate world." The conversation kind of paused, and a few people looked at me. I felt like I had their attention, so I continued. I explained that what he sees as efficiency can often be perceived as dismissive of other collaborative approaches, which are often punished in male-dominated spaces. I felt I was making a really good point. I was being articulate and passionate. Then I said the words, "As a feminist, I can tell you that a lot of corporate language is designed to uphold patriarchal structures." Silence. It wasn't a loud silence, but it was heavy. It was like someone had sucked all the air out of the room for a second. Dan just stared at me with a blank expression. I looked over at Eric. His smile was gone. It wasn't replaced with a frown or anger, just nothing. His face was completely neutral, and his eyes were looking at me differently. It was a look I'd never seen from him before. Distant. He blinked slowly. Then I saw it. Stephen, who was sitting across the room, looked directly at Eric. It was a quick glance, but it was packed with meaning. Eric gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible shake of his head. The whole exchange lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then, as if a switch was flipped, Stephen turned to Dan and said, "Dude, forget your boss. Did you see the game last night? That final play was insane." And just like that, the conversation completely shifted. They were all talking about sports. My point, my entire contribution, was just left hanging in the air, completely ignored. It was so abrupt and obvious. I tried to chime in a couple more times on other topics, but the responses I got were short. Polite, but short, especially from Eric. He wasn't mean, but the warmth was gone. He was giving one-word answers. He physically shifted on the couch, turning his body slightly away from me. I felt this chill run down my spine. What just happened? Did I say something wrong? I was just expressing my opinion. I thought this was a safe space to share ideas. The rest of the night was awkward. I felt like an outsider all of a sudden. The easy, welcoming vibe was gone, replaced by a polite, formal distance. I felt like I was back on my first day at a new school. I decided to leave early. I told Anna I wasn't feeling well. When I said goodbye to Eric, he just said, "Okay, take care." No hug. No, "I'll text you tomorrow." Nothing. I walked home that night replaying that moment over and over in my head. The silence, the look on Eric's face, the glance between him and Stephen. I tried to convince myself I was overthinking it. Maybe they were just really passionate about sports. Maybe Dan was just embarrassed I called him out, and everyone was trying to change the subject to spare his feelings. I decided to just let it go and see what happened. Maybe I was just being paranoid. I got home and checked my phone. Nothing from Eric. That was the first night since we met that he didn't send a good night text. That was a bad sign. The next day, I waited. No good morning text. The silence was deafening. By the afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to just act normal. I sent him a message. "Hey, still on for the movies on Friday?" I tried to make it sound cheerful and casual. I watched my phone for what felt like an eternity. 3 dots appeared. He was typing. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. Finally, a message came through. "Hey, sorry, something came up. Feeling a bit under the weather. Rain check." My heart sank. Under the weather. The oldest, vaguest excuse in the book. Rain check. The non-committal promise that never happens. I knew what this was, but I still held on to a sliver of hope. I typed back, "Oh no, hope you feel better. Let me know when you're free next week." I put my phone down and tried to distract myself. A few hours later, I checked. My message had a read receipt under it. But there was no reply, and there wouldn't be one. The week went by in a blur of confusion and hurt. I didn't hear a single word from Merrick. I saw he was online. I saw he was posting things on social media. He wasn't in a coma. He was just ignoring me. I tried to reach out to some of the other guys from the group just to test the waters. I replied to a funny story Dan posted online. Usually he was super chatty. This time, all I got back was a emoji. It felt like hitting a brick wall. The final nail in the coffin came on Saturday night. I was scrolling through my phone, feeling sorry for myself, and then I saw it. A new post from Anna. It was a group photo. The whole gang was at a bowling alley. Anna, Stephen, Dan, the other girl, and Eric. He was standing in the middle, smiling, holding a bowling ball. He looked perfectly healthy. Not under the weather at all. They were all there, everyone except me. The feeling wasn't just sadness anymore. It was humiliation. They had deliberately excluded me. It was a group decision. They had a whole group chat. I knew it. They had planned this. And the reason was so obvious. It all came back to that one moment at the party. That one word, feminist. It was like I had revealed I had a contagious disease. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How could one word make someone do a complete 180? Eric went from being this sweet, interested, attentive guy to a cold, distant stranger overnight. And it wasn't just him. It was all of them. They had closed ranks. I felt this wave of anger wash over me. What was their problem? Were their male egos so fragile that they couldn't handle being in the same room as a woman with strong political convictions? I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I contributed to a conversation. And for that, I was ostracized. It confirmed every negative thing I had ever thought about male fragility and toxic masculinity. They couldn't handle a challenge. They just wanted a smiling, agreeable girl who would laugh at their jokes and never question anything. I was hurt, but I was also furious. Furious at them for being so childish. Furious at society for making men this way. And furious at myself for a tiny, shameful part of me that wished I had just kept my mouth shut. I hated that I felt that way. Why should I have to censor myself to be accepted? Why should I have to hide a core part of my identity to get a second date? It felt incredibly unfair. The next couple of weeks were miserable. I felt so isolated. Seeing Anna was weird now, too. She knew what was happening, but she didn't say anything about it. She'd talk about her week, but she'd conveniently leave out any mention of hanging out with the group. It was like she was trying to protect my feelings, but the omission was just as loud as the truth. It felt like a betrayal. She was my friend. She brought me into this group, and now she was just silently watching as they all pushed me out. I finally got to a point where I couldn't take the silence and the confusion anymore. I needed answers. I needed a confrontation. I couldn't talk to Eric. He had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with me. So I called the one person I thought owed me an explanation. I called Anna. She picked up on the third ring, sounding a little surprised to hear from me. We hadn't really talked one-on-one since that night at Stevens. I didn't waste any time with small talk. I just came right out and asked her what was going on. I told her I saw the pictures from the bowling alley. I told her how Eric had completely ghosted me after making plans for a date. My voice was shaking a little bit, a mix of anger and hurt. I laid it all out. It's because I said I was a feminist, isn't it? That's the only thing that changed. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear her take a deep breath. I was expecting her to deny it, to make up some excuse for them, to say it was a misunderstanding or that I was reading too much into things, but she didn't. Her voice was quiet when she finally spoke. "Ramona, we need to talk. Can you come over?" So I went to her apartment. The whole ride over, I was building my case in my head. I was ready for a fight. I was ready to list all the ways her friends were being immature, sexist, and fragile. I was ready to defend my beliefs. When I got there, she made us some tea and we sat down at her kitchen table. She looked tired. I started in again, my voice full of righteous indignation. "I just don't get it, Anna. What is so threatening about a woman who believes in equality? Eric seems so great, so open-minded. But the second I mention feminism, he runs for the hills. He and all his friends. They're all just a bunch of hypocrites." I was on a roll, listing all their faults. Anna just sat there, listening patiently. She didn't interrupt me. She let me get it all out. When I finally ran out of steam, I just sat there, breathing heavily, waiting for her to argue with me. She took a sip of her tea. "Are you done?" she asked calmly. I nodded. "Okay," she said, putting her mug down. "Now you're going to listen to me." Her tone shifted. It wasn't angry, but it was firm. It was the voice of a friend who was about to tell you a hard truth. "You're right about one thing," she started. "It is because you said you're a feminist." I started to say I knew it, but she held up a hand to stop me. "But you are completely wrong about the reason why." She leaned forward. "Do you honestly believe those guys are scared of a strong, opinionated woman? Ramona, my mom is a strong woman. Stephen's sister is a surgeon. These guys are not intimidated by successful, confident women." I just stared at her, confused. "Then what is it?" I asked. "It's not the word," she said. "It's what the word has come to represent to them, to guys like them." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "To you, the word feminist means equality. You believe that, and that's fine. But to them, based on everything they see and experience, it's a giant red flag. It's a warning sign." I must have had a look of total disbelief on my face, because she kept going. "Think about it from their perspective. They hear that word, and their brains don't think equality. They think conflict. They think adversary." I started to protest, to say that's not what I am. "Let me finish," she said. "To them, dating a self-proclaimed feminist is like willingly walking into a minefield. They're thinking, is every movie we watch going to be dissected for its patriarchal undertones? Is every compliment I give going to be analyzed for hidden microaggressions? If we have a disagreement, is it because I'm wrong, or is it because of my toxic masculinity? Every word was like a small punch to the gut. It's exhaustion, Ramona. They're already tired. They work, they deal with their own problems. The last thing they want is to come home to a relationship that feels like a constant political debate or a gender studies lecture. She leaned back in her chair. Eric didn't meet a political activist at that bar. He met a fun, charming, interesting woman named Ramona. He was excited about getting to know her. But at that party, you didn't show him Ramona. You showed him an ideology. You put a label on yourself, and that label comes with a mountain of negative baggage for them. I was speechless. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't find the words, because a part of me knew she was right. I thought back to my past relationships, the arguments that started because I pointed out the problematic language in a joke he made, the times I corrected him on his worldview. I always thought I was educating him, but maybe he just felt like he was being constantly criticized. Anna's voice softened a little. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't have your beliefs, but you have to understand that when you lead with that label, you're not inviting a discussion. You're basically issuing a challenge. You're prejudging them before they even have a chance to show you who they are. You put them on the defensive from the very first moment. She took another sip of tea. Eric's a good guy. He's not a misogynist. He just wants peace. He wants a partner, not a project. He wants a girlfriend, not a political opponent. When you made that speech at the party, you essentially told him and every other guy in that room that a relationship with you would be hard work, that it would be a struggle, and they just don't have the energy for that fight. They'd rather just not play the game at all. She finished with a line that has been stuck in my head ever since. They didn't reject you because they hate women, Ramona. They avoided you because they value their own peace of mind. We sat in silence for a long time after that. There was nothing left to say. She had laid it all out. It wasn't a comforting truth. It was a cold, hard, logical explanation. I felt numb. The anger I had felt was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow feeling of understanding. It was a horrible feeling, because it meant they weren't the villains in my story. It meant that maybe I was. I had been so wrapped up in being right that I never stopped to consider how my approach made other people feel, especially the people I wanted to get close to. I had created my own loneliness. I drove home in a daze. Anna's words were just echoing in my skull. A partner, not a project. They value their peace of mind. I got back to my apartment, and it felt so empty. I sat on my couch in the dark. I thought about Eric. I thought about how easy and fun it was before I flipped that switch, before I felt the need to perform my ideology. He wasn't avoiding me because he was fragile. He was avoiding me because I had presented myself as a source of future conflict. He had made a logical choice, a form of self-preservation. He had seen the red flag I was waving so proudly, and he had simply decided to walk in the other direction. And his friends, they had his back. They saw their friend about to walk into that minefield, and they pulled him back. I had seen it as a cowardly retreat. They saw it as a strategic withdrawal. I unlocked my phone and scrolled through my photos. I had no pictures of Eric, of course. I scrolled through my social media. I saw pictures of me with old college friends at protests and rallies, pictures with captions quoting feminist authors. My entire online identity was built around this one label. It was my armor, but it was also my cage. It had kept me safe in my echo chamber, but it had also locked everyone else out, especially the kind of normal, stable, peaceful man I secretly wanted. The shock wasn't that men were avoiding me after learning I was a feminist. The shock was finally understanding why. It wasn't about them being weak. It was about me being exhausting. I looked around my quiet apartment. I had my strong opinions. I had my righteous anger. I had my ideology. And I was completely, utterly alone.